learnt about it in Vancouver. Speaking of intersectoral action, in this massive land area, there is a collaborative spirit because people have no choice. There's so few people on the ground, they have to figure out how to work together to achieve common ground. And one of the places that had started in BC was the Northern Regional Drinking Water Team, which is, health has to be at the table because they govern the Regional Drinking Water Act in British Columbia, and then they have to team up with agriculture, environment, oil and gas, transportation, everybody else, the dirt ministries, people doing stuff on the land, and they were really trying to figure out who's got this covered. Where are we actually covering the important issues around source water protection, not just for people, but for understanding the broader issues. So there was a collaborative spirit that was already underway that I entered into, and then there was a lot of regional activities and events that led to this project, and some of them actually were the highlighting of these issues unfolding already in certain watersheds. So I had met Reg, and getting familiar with the Augustana is one that you've heard about. There's a lot of interesting work happening in the Murray Creek, and each of these are watershed initiatives coming from completely different spaces. A municipality in Dawson Creek, in the Murray Creek, and in the Chaco, very much a riparian restoration-led watershed project. These are not top-down, you must have a watershed governance model. These are people saying, we've got to get our act together and think in a watershed way. And so the Cornell River Research Centre is actually it's a university research centre, but all coming from a different place, where it seemed that there were some real opportunities to say, how could we learn among these different examples about this intersectoral idea, about connecting the social and environment from these different contexts. So this particular project, we were tasked to try and strengthen intersectoral action to improve water-related determinants of health. Now, water-related determinants of health, if you read that and you think E. coli, you haven't been listening. You want to be thinking water-related determinants of health to be the health and well-being of contact with nature, the positive pieces that engagement with watersheds can give you, not just the nasty thing that makes you sick. And so what's important about these next points is that we had a steering committee that was a university and a health authority working together as co-chairs to have conversations about this stuff, which was difficult. They were new conversations to have, but a lot of watershed people wanting to come to the table and be part of those conversations. And so really, I see it as an exercise in learning how to learn together. And I've heard the learn word a lot in the last couple of days, and that is something that we have to do. Not actually, our goal is not to learn so that we have all the knowledge and somebody else doesn't. Our goal is to actually figure out how we can share what we know among people to be able to understand the system as a whole. But I really want to mention that in doing this, things get really messy. This was an effort in an early phase, and the point is to not try and understand this diagram, but actually realize, whoa, these guys are trying to get their head around things in common. What we're seeing here is an original diagram from Northern Health about driving forces that influence the determinants of health and socioeconomic factors and behavioural factors and biological factors and health conditions in the north. And then we tried to add the biophysical, and we're talking about some of the classic biophysical dynamics. But even that was way too linear for people, and then they wanted to have conversations about why these things needed to be messed up again. And the point is that you can do this in your head till you're blue in the face, but actually what was really meaningful is when we got people out onto the watershed, seeing those issues and having conversations about them, seeing that as things manifested on the ground. And so one of the things we also tried to do is to try creative ways to get these touch points. And here's a couple of examples from the interviews. In health, we have upstream risk factors that if you don't manage, you become sick. For me, what has been interesting is that you have similar things in the environment sector. As soon as you align them, there are many touch points, and that was an eye-opener. If you look at these upstream risk factors, you can see this. This was an aha moment. Now, this is the kind of thing where you really think this should be happening. Of course, the health sector should have a bit of a feel for what the environment sector does, but actually there's no reason at all for them to communicate with each other. And so we have to create these spaces to see the commonalities. And here's another one, the opportunity to learn. The opportunity to learn from those that are practitioners across the province, across Canada. I've got my eyes wide open. I'm totally enthralled. I've had a lot of growth on this issue. So we're talking about why would you bother? well, you'd bother if you're learning. And I think that that's a really critical thing. If you're actually improving your grasp of this you're not going to get a comprehensive understanding, but if you're improving your grasp of the connections, then it's a motivation to keep being engaged. And so one of the things we did is we really struggled. Should we get each other to read each other's reports, lock them in a room and get them to read papers? Well, no, that's not going to work. Should we be getting them to just do PowerPoint presentations? But we're really struggling with that, and we decided to take a bit of a risk, and we used an idea of initially just sort of, you can start to do these messy mind maps, but one of the things that we really landed on was the idea of rich picture mapping. Now, rich picture mapping the theme here is around what happens when you're creative and you're actually taking yourself out of your own language, and in this case you're drawing what you know. So you can see in the bottom here, this is somebody drawing their rich picture map of what they see are the issues from their perspective. Now, by doing this, they can't use any of the geeky language that people don't understand. They're drawing what is real and they're talking to each other about it. And it's that piece that led to some really fascinating conversations about where the touch points could be for new conversations. And so one of the places where this landed, and I'm just going to spin through and look at last couple of slides here about a position paper that Northern Health put together, and I've got a copy here if you want to put it, have a look at it. It doesn't say watersheds and health, it does say a position on the environment as context for health. And what it is, it's now up on the website. This was a big deal, and it shouldn't be a big deal, but it was a big deal to get a health authority making this as a position for how it's seeing its future work. And so it is now on the Northern Health website, and it is about, based on our sort of rich picture mapping work, we were really clear about needing some good visuals here. And so somebody made this image of trying to create a sense of where everybody lives in a version of this. Of course, you can be living in Prince George, which is 10 times the size or whatever, but there are all schools, hospitals, houses, communities are embedded in larger watersheds. And so that's what we're seeing. The purpose here was to actually really emphasise those embedded connections of the things that we already know are important for our health and well-being. And we use this language of an integrated settings approach. Settings is a bit of a health promotion word, but the reason is that we're seeing these patterns of things shifting from where if you see yourself as a watershed person, you might put yourself on the right-hand side with the green, and there's a healthy edge of these green settings where you've been working. But likewise, there's actually a green edge of a lot of the places where we've tended to do things in the past to promote health and well-being, like schools, like hospitals, like workplaces, and all of those things are actually in watersheds, of course. And when you do get into the really exciting healthy eating, active living projects in schools that are getting kids out into the land, then you're messing this up. You're creating the interface among these kinds of ideas. So we've continued to do this as a team, and we are continuing to do it, which is to have these kind of workshops and activities. I was just up in Dawson Creek last week, and it's a classic example of where I've read things up the wazoo about Augustana, but actually going there and seeing the issues myself was really transformative for the learning, and just how powerful that is. And in the final document, not this version, but the final document on the web, we acknowledge things like the watershed atlases in the Augustana as the kind of innovation that's pretty exciting. So my final two slides here is this idea that we've been talking a lot about intersectoral action and the need. What this requires is us all acknowledging that there is a space between our different areas of work, and that working in that space in between gets us asking questions like who knows what, who talks to who, why not, and this common space in between. That we can think of watersheds as learning labs to do this kind of work, and we can start to shift from our silos to actually back into living systems where these connections come to life. And that there are these glues and threads of integration that occur in watersheds in ways that we haven't seen before. I think this idea of getting hands wet and dirty really came up this morning. There's important things about humility, about trust, about humour, about what happens when you put children into the mix, about what happens when you put water into the mix. That's really powerful for these kinds of issues. And I like to have this overlaid idea, which is that we have to deal with this mismatch that we have between our human systems that are all in silos and the natural systems that we are all embedded in. And so that this does actually mean that we're starting to, it does require us to use different language and different ideas. So it's an idea of a creative space where you can find possibilities that you might not have otherwise. Finally, it's this idea, which I think is extremely important, that when you do create these creative spaces, it's shifting from doing the same things better, doing what we've always done, and thinking if we could just do it better, we could leap through, to taking that creative leap where we're actually doing better things. We're working in ways we would never have imagined, and we're doing a better kind of thing. And I think that that's what I'm hearing from these conversations, that people are seeing the potential to make those kind of leaps. So I think that's it. Thank you.